Good evening, councillors. Welcome to this Scrutiny Committee for Leader, Finance and Performance. I'm going to hand this over to Tom Clark, who will do the roll call, the welcome and the legal notice. Tom, over to you.
Good evening, members. And this meeting is being held virtually, probably the last one we'll do for a while, virtually. It is an advisory committee, so it is in order to hold them virtually. If I could do the roll call, Councillor Alison Bennett.
Present.
Councillor Heidi Brunsden. Councillor Anne Boutrop.
Present.
Councillor Philip Coote. I can see Councillor Philip Coote. Councillor John DeBell.
Present.
Councillor Anne Eves.
Present.
Councillor Janice Henwood. Councillor Janice Henwood. Councillor Simon Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Rodney Jackson.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Lee.
Present.
Councillor Chris Phillips.
Present.
And Councillor Mike Porfer.
Present.
Councillor Lynn Stockwell.
Present.
Councillor Dick Swetman.
Present.
And Councillor Colin Trumbull.
And Coote on parade.
Councillor Colin Trumbull. No, so at the moment I'm missing Councillor Heidi Brunsden, Councillor Janice Henwood and Councillor Colin Trumbull. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Please note that Councillor Knight gives his apologies. Therefore, I am acting as chair and I have appointed Councillor Linda Stockwell for this evening's meeting, and I seek the approval of the committee for this by members nodding their approval. Good. Thank you. To note, item 2 is to note the substitutes. Councillor DeBell is substituting for Councillor Knight. Councillor Boutrop is substituting for Councillor Smith, and Councillor Swetman is substituting for Councillor Whitaker. Then to item 3, to receive apologies for absence. And that is from Councillor Knight, Councillor Smith, Councillor Whitaker. And I would like to welcome Councillor Chris Phillips and Councillor Sam Smith, who've joined this committee.
Thank you.
On to item 4, to receive declarations of interest from any members in respect of any matters on the agenda. Members to raise their hands on the function button if they have to indicate. I see none, so I'm going to move on. Thank you. So item 5, to confirm the minutes held on the 27th of March 2022. Members to vote with the yes, no buttons. And Alison will be kind enough to announce the result. Thank you.
Like I wasn't at the last meeting.
No, nor were you. I think everybody who was there have confirmed that they're agreed.
That's 8 votes for, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, on to item 6. To consider any items the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. And therefore we turn to item 7, the performance outturn for 2021, which is going to start with Mr. Neil Barton. Now, might I suggest that if we turn to our papers, we see that these are all handily put into sections, and I'm going to go through the sections and ask you if you have got any comments on that section. I'm not going to go through it line by line, particularly the development management one. And I hope that you're all comfortable with that proposal. Mr. Neil Barton, if you would like to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the out-term performance report for 2021-22. And it covers the period 1st of April 2021 to the end of March 2022. So performance has been generally good through the year, with 71% of our indicators showing at green, meaning that they're on or above target. So the report is in the normal format with an appendix, which includes the performance indicators that the Scrutiny Committee monitors. And we're using the traffic light system to show how we've performed against target. As we've said throughout the reporting in the year, our services have continued to be affected by COVID and the pandemic. Some of our services, as we've mentioned before, have taken on extra responsibilities through COVID, especially environmental health, the housing team in having to put more people in temporary accommodation, and also our revenues and benefits team. So in the Appendix A, we've got 3 years of data. So we've got the obviously the 21-22, the previous year, and 2019-20 outturn figures. We thought this would be useful because the 2019-20 figures are broadly the pre-pandemic situation. So members will recall that the first lockdown for COVID happened in March 2020. And also members have asked previously for some longer term presentation of information. The other thing I wanted to mention was that you've also previously asked us to provide in the end of year report some information about the performance of the planning enforcement team, which we've included a summary of what their activity on page 22 of the report under development management. So in the appendix, where we're off target, we've tried to give the reasons for that and also explain what we're doing to get performance back on track. I also wanted to highlight Appendix B of the report, which is on page 31 and 32. These are some proposed changes to the indicators that the committee monitors for 22-23. Some of these have come up from the preparation of service plans. One of those is also due to the fact that we're not able to collect the data to present that performance indicator. We've also tried to take into account the comments of the committee over the last year in, for example, suggesting that we add a performance indicator on fly tipping to the ones that we monitor for waste. So that's my introduction to the report, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. That's excellent. So if we might turn to page 13, and the first item there is building control, and I will look on the screen to see if anybody flags up that they want to discuss anything. If they're not, we will move on, and I see nothing. Land charges, would anybody like to comment on anything there? No, thank you. Legal and member services, are there any councillors who'd like to comment on that one? Councillor Andrew Lee.
Yeah, I'm confused. You seem to have skipped page 14.
Councillor Lee, you're absolutely right. I'm absolutely incapable of reading both sides of one piece of paper. And thank you. Well, let's just do the land charges. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on that? No, then I'll go back to 14. Thank you, Councillor Lee. Community services and policy and performance. I see nothing on that. Environmental health. I see nothing on that. Now I can go to legal and member services. Is there anything on that? No, there's not. Thank you. And then on page 16, there's finance. Are there any comments on that? I see none. Landscapes. Councillor Stockwell.
Oh, thank you. Yes, what was I going to say on landscapes? Trying to read my little note. Unfortunately, yes, we're down on the satisfaction on our landscapes, which is to some extent understandable, but equally is a bit alarming. And I wondered, from the feedback you've had, are there any other actions that we can take to improve what's happening within our landscapes, improve the results that we're getting? I don't know if that's something that Neil might be able to enlighten us on.
Neil, would you like to comment on that?
I was thinking that might be more appropriate for Rob Anderton to comment on, because that's his area of service. Thank you.
Yes, he looks
Thank
very
you.
happy that he'd be to do that too. So, Rob, if you would.
Yeah, thank you,
Rob.
Chairman. Yeah, no problem. So just to draw your attention to the note against that indicator, the reason that the survey, the satisfaction numbers have gone down is because of a change in the methodology. So historically, what we actually did is we used to go out and literally nobble people in our parks and ask them for their feedback. And there was a general, obviously, inclination for people to be more polite, more positive in that circumstance than perhaps they are when they've got free rein to submit their feedback online. So there is a general trend that is acknowledged across the industry that when you give people the freedom to fill out a free-form survey in their own time without anybody asking them those questions face to face, they'll be more inclined to provide a more balanced set of feedback. So this is the first time that we've done this, and what we're going to be doing is obviously monitoring those results and looking at what would be a sensible benchmark going forward. I think one of the values of that approach, though, is that it does give us a much better, richer set of data that we can kind of respond to in a more timely way. So again, going forward, we're not actually in a position yet, but going forward, we'll certainly be able to provide a much more detailed picture of what people think and what we might be doing differently.
Thank you.
Rob, and thank you very much. I think you're content with that, Councillor Stockwell?
Yes, that's. I know it's being taken forward, which is the main thing, which is great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. And there are no other hands up or indicators, so I'm going to move on to property and asset management. Is there Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was impressed by the return on tenanted non-residential property portfolio, the percentage going up, which rather surprised me, because given the situation over the last year where a lot of shops and offices have been able to pay their rent, I must admit I expected that figure to reduce. Is there any explanation, or would a written answer afterwards be more appropriate as to how we've actually achieved that figure?
Which of the officers would like to answer that? Neil or Rob? Or it may even be Peter.
I was going to suggest Peter might want to take that one, if possible.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we will do a written answer. I mean, what I would say is that is by no means an easy indicator to calculate, given that it's a factor between the value of the property and the rent that comes in. And you'll appreciate that the value of property goes up and down, and according to the valuation and the economy at that time. So it's entirely possible, I hate to say it, that the value of the property might have come down. Therefore, if the rent stays stable, the indicator will improve. Now, the jury is out really whether that's a good thing or not, if the value goes down. All I can say really, more importantly, is that our rental income is holding steady, regardless of the underlying value of the property. So our revenue stream is stable, if not improving, as the economy improves. And when, I suppose, the downside of that is that when the economy does improve and the values go back up again, if on the same rent, the indicator will go down because of the way that the maths works. But I think probably the best thing to do probably would be to give you the figures by way of a separate letter post the committee, so which explains it in more detail. So you can actually see the figures that make up the indicator.
Thank you.
Peter, thank you. Councillor Phillips, are you content?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hicks.
Yes, Chairman. I was going to ask the same question, really, in terms of is possibly a positive improvement. I wonder, in the light of the response there, whether we need to look at how the indicator is calculated and whether it would be more appropriate to calculate it on the cost to the council in terms of the costs that the council has expended in producing that capital paying for it, and whether it includes the effect of voids anyway, in terms of if we're averaging it across just the properties that we rent that are actually let, or whether it's across all the portfolio and therefore takes account of voids.
Peter, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I mean, as I say, but it's by no means a very. It's probably a simplistic performance indicator, because if you wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of across the whole portfolio, it would become quite complicated. I think we don't have many voids actually in our tenanted properties. Our commercial tenanted properties are actually pretty much let all the time. The only one I can think of that actually has any turnover, as people might have walked through it, is the Orchard Centre. Has a couple of spare units, pretty much almost all the time, because retailers come and go. Other than that, our industrial estates are pretty much rented throughout the year on long leases. So it will take account of voids, but given our rent roll is actually quite large, an individual void won't have much effect at all. I think probably we can set out a bit more detail for those people who are interested in a separate letter, and that may give you some reassurance of how it's calculated. But it almost also may, I have to say, it may also provoke more questions about how you'd like to see that reported in the future. We're quite happy to do it either way.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Hicks, are you content with that answer?
Thank you, yes.
Peter, if you are going to do effectively a written reply to Councillor Hicks, you might perhaps be kind enough to copy in all committee members so they can see what's going on.
I had anticipated that. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands up, and I'm having to switch between screens to do this. So I'm going to move on to waste and outdoor services. Are there any matters that you would like to raise on that? Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things. The amount of waste per household which is disposed of in landfill. One of the questions I have is how successful is our small electrical item collection going? And on the next item below the one I've just mentioned, percentage of household waste, what does that actually include? Is that just garden waste, or is that that's obviously our recycling and garden waste, but does that also include the small electrical items? And then on the next page, or page whatever it is, 18, yes, the last two items, percentage of land assessed as below levels acceptable, and those that want with acceptable levels of detritus. Are these two PIs similar, the same, or what is the difference between the two? I wonder if you can help me with that, please.
Councillor Stockwell, which of the officers would like to Rob.
Yeah, I
Thank
can
you
do
very
that.
much.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, no problem. On the amount of waste per household, and it linked to the question around the recycling rates as well. Small waste electricals service is going very well. We obviously, as you would expect, had a real flurry of activity on that when we launched the service, and everybody emptying their lofts and their sheds and so on. We're now in more of a sort of steady state, but it's a very popular service, and we collect a good volume of waste electricals every week. In terms of what is included in the recycling rate, it is essentially everything that we recycle from the doorstep. So it's the dry recycling, it's the green waste, it will be the waste electricals, everything that's recycled at the doorstep. On the question around land assessors having below acceptable levels of litter and detritus, litter is essentially crisp packets and bits of paper and tin cans and so on. Detritus is organic matter, so it's where there's rotted down leaf matter on the curb or whatever that is, that sort of thing. So two distinct elements that reflect how clean our streets are and how well we're maintaining them.
Yeah, thank you for that. Chair, may I just ask one more question on that issue, on the issue on the small electrical stuff?
Please do.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Rob. That was a good, comprehensive answer. I would just like to let it be known that while you're saying that the collection of these small electrical items is going really well, I have had complaints from people to say that on occasions, rather than their bag of stuff being put to one side, be dealt with separately, is getting chucked into the main landfill waste, which they are very unhappy about. And I've suggested at times that, that perhaps they're on the wrong end of the collection, where it's perhaps the bin is already full. But that is something that I do think needs to be looked at, because it's being so successful. We've almost made a rob our own backs here, because people they know that they can get rid of those electrical items via the doorstep collection. They need to know it's going to be dealt with as they anticipate it is. So can we, I don't know, it's something you can really keep an eye on, because as I say, I do get complaints from residents that they don't feel it's being dealt with appropriately. Thank you.
Chairman, would you like me to come back on that?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So yes, absolutely. It has been extremely successful, and the capacity on the vehicles is limited. So certainly in the early stages, there were times when we were getting to the end of the round and there were waste electricals that we couldn't pick up. In those circumstances, what we ask of both the crews and the residents is that they're presented again the following week, and we will come back again. We've had one or two reports of issues with crews disposing of waste electricals in the general waste. We've investigated those, we followed those up. They were isolated incidents, and as I understand it, I certainly haven't heard anything along those lines for some time now. If anyone does experience that, of course, we'd encourage them to contact the team, and we can follow that up with Serco, because we would absolutely, for all the reasons you've said, want to avoid that. People are taking the time to collect and gather their waste electricals and present them in a certain way, and we should be recycling those and certainly not disposing of them in landfill.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Rob, thank you for that. But just remind me, the electricals, are they put out on either the grey or the blue bin, or specifically on one?
Thank you, Chairman. Specifically on one, but I'm afraid off the top of my head, I can't tell you which. I would need to confirm that. I can confirm that to you.
The bin service,
yeah.
Not the recycling.
Oh, it's the recycling bin.
It's not the recycling. It's the bin service.
It's the grey bin.
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Coo. You're muted.
I'm having trouble with my computer today. It's me. Just on a positive note, I put out 2 electrical items yesterday in a grey sack as they asked, and they came and they took them away. but I didn't put them on the recycling, I put them on the ordinary dustbin. So I don't know, perhaps I got it wrong, but they certainly took them away.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. I do not see anybody else who would like to raise a question. So that being so, I'm going to go on to economic development on page 19. Is there anybody who would like to raise a comment on that item? I see none, so I'm going to move on to parking services. Councillor Anne Eves.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at the percentage of pay and display transactions made by cashless payment, and I wonder whether when we were 80p instead of £1, obviously that was an incentive to use cashless, because if you didn't have 80p, you'd have to fork out £1 and people would find that very annoying. So did we experience a drop in revenue when we were charging 80p because people were getting into the idea of cashless payments? Do you see what I'm saying?
Thank you, Councillor Eves. Who would like to answer that? Rob, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the difficulty we would have in assessing any impact of that would be the fact that it's been so coloured by the impact of the pandemic. So as you will have seen in pretty much every shop that you visit, people are expressing a preference for cashless payments, for card payments, and both in terms of retailers and in terms of customers. So there has been a massive impact on our cashless transaction numbers purely as a consequence of the pandemic. And I think any impact that there might have been as a consequence of a change in the tariff structures, it can be very difficult to isolate. And if there has been one, it will have been relatively small.
Thank you. Are you content, Councillor Eves? Thank you. Councillor Angeli.
Yes, thank you, Chair. With these cashless payments, I assume that we wind up having to give a bit of money to the credit card company or to the app company that people are paying with. So question one, is that correct? And question two, has that reduced, therefore, the amount of money we take compared to physical cash?
Do you like me to respond?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So yes, we do. We do pay a transaction charge to the credit card company and to the pay by phone provider. Those costs are relatively small, and they were factored in the business case when we were considering the rollout of this initiative. But what I would say is that they are partly offset, if not entirely offset, by the fact that we are not paying for the same number of cash collections as we were prior to the introduction of cashless parking. So our outgoings in respect of security services have gone down significantly.
Thank you, Rob. You content, Councillor Lee?
Yes, so as I understand it, that's a net financial benefit from what I think I've just heard. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised, so I'm going to move on to sustainability on page 20. Are there any comments on that, Councillor Eves?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered, on the MIS, it said there was an update about EVCPs and I couldn't seem to find it. So I don't know whether it's just me or, and could we have an update now? Thank you.
Who would like to take that? Rob, I don't seem to have gone off the screen. Neil.
Emma's going to deal with it.
Are you? Oh, sorry, Emma. Sorry, I didn't look along the other side there. Thank you.
Yes, that's me. Certainly. Yes, I will look into that for you, councillors, because there should have been an update attached to that. We now have 5 sites live. Vicarage Car Park, Franklin Road Car Park, Hazel Grove Car Park, Orion Parade Car Park and Norton House Car Park went live yesterday. Trinity Road Car Park will go live next week. The following week we'll have Denham's Lane. The week after that, Cypress Road. We hope we're having to do some investigative work in terms of the UK Power Network supply to that site. followed by Checkermead, and then Station Road and Queensway. So the programme is on track, and from what we can see, the new chargers are operating successfully and are being well used already, which is encouraging.
Thank you, Emma. If I might just comment, though, on Sunday morning in the Franklin Road car park, the cars were ordinary petrol or diesel, all parked in those spots. So it might need to be a little more signage, but I'll leave that for you to consider at another time.
We are still at the soft launch stage, so signing and lining is still following, and also there is a new parking order that will allow us to enforce that. So as those things all come online, as we reach the full completion of phase 1, that will be addressed, Councillor Pulford. Yes.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Coote.
It's just a small point, Chairman. There is a parking meter or a parking payment machine in East Grinstead outside in High Street. It is at a fair angle. It's been hit by something. It's been like that for the last 9 months. I have reported it many times. Perhaps on this auspicious occasion, somebody might take notice and go and straighten it up before it falls over and damages somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coote.
They want further information as to where it is. If they like to contact me, I will tell them exactly. But it's outside the old bookshop.
Thank
in
you.
High Street. Thanks.
Emma, would you be prepared to take ownership of that?
That'll be Rob.
That'll be Rob, will it? Rob, you're just thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hicks.
Yes, Chairman. Just in terms of usage of charging points, to make the indicator more meaningful, could we look at having the usage per site? Because that's going to increase with the number of sites, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're more successful if we're not monitoring the actual usage per installed site.
We certainly can monitor that and provide that information moving forward once all the sites are up and live. We do have a back office dashboard that we can run reports of. Members will know that there is opportunity to discuss indicators for next year. So we are obviously happy to hear member views on that, but it is possible to provide that information, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Councillor Coote, I think probably you are looking to take your hand down, aren't you? And I'm going to go to Councillor Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As the picture evolves of how the new EV charging points are being used, using that data, what plans are there to promote that they're there and ensure that if some aren't being used, particularly to begin with, awareness of them grows?
We actually had a meeting on Monday with Connect to Curb and their marketing and comms team to discuss that very situation. There is a very detailed marketing and communications program that you will start seeing now that the sites are going live. That starts off at quite a localized level with both our own council communications channels across the board, and Connect to Curb are doing some paid advertising both in traditional channels and very targeted social media. That starts with a coming soon kind of message with, these chargers are coming to your area, with a call to action to kind of register on the app and get ready for when they're available. That then transforms into a messaging around your chargers are here, they're live, you can use them. That will be done again at a very localized level as well as district-wide. We've done quite a lot of stakeholder engagement with various partner organisations, landowners, businesses, other organisations across the district as part of our initial work on the network planning aspect. So where we go beyond phase 1, because this is just the start. And those partners will be promoting through their organisations to their employees, to their customers, that these are available as well. So as it will be an ongoing process that gradually ramps up as we see more and more chargers come online. But first of all, we wanted to make sure we could get at least some of them in first, check that they were all working properly. And also we were in the slightly difficult situation of having to delay the official launch because obviously we had elections across the county. This is a partnership county project, and whilst we didn't have elections here in mid-Sussex, there were elections in some of the other districts and boroughs, so we had to wait for that period to finish. So now that that's over and everything's settled down that way, we'll be going ahead with that, so you will start seeing that from this week.
Thank you, Emma. You content, Councillor Bennett? Thank you. I see no more hands up on sustainability, so I'm going to move on to development management. Councillor Lynn Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this was interesting. I was looking at the average time taken to process planning applications, and I realised there was 4 lots. I thought, well, don't add up. But then when I got to reading Appendix B, I could see that plans are afoot to make this make it more appropriate, if you like. It was a bit, breaking it down into the major, the regular, and the small planning applications. So I'm pleased to see that, because otherwise we'd be looking at a red status, which I didn't like very much either. But I understand the detail behind that. Where's my other piece have gone? Oh yes, the other question I had really was around the enforcements. Clearly that's going along. It is happening. What I do find, I was wondering whether where an enforcement on a planning enforcement is taken up, whether the ward councillors should be advised of it, because very often they may have had some conversations with residents without knowing what has gone on with these enforcements. And I wondered if it was something that could be taken up by the cabinet member. He's not here today, unless that's Norman stuff. Because personally, I would find that quite useful to know if there is something that is being developed, but they're not following proper procedures, etc. So I wonder if that is something that could be taken forward. I don't know who would want to respond to that, or who would want to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Neil, would you like to direct who might be able to take that?
I don't know whether Judy Holmes might like to take that one, or
Judy, would you like to take it?
Can't hear you, Judy.
Sally's asking to.
Oh, sorry. So, Judy, are you going to take that, or Sally, are you going to take it?
I think I'm having IT problems. Oh, it's working now. No, that's fine. I mean, Sally or I could take it. I think that's something that we can definitely consider and discuss with the cabinet members. So thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands on development management, so we are going to move on to housing. And Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. These are obviously no targets, they're just numbers, but are we anticipating an increase in the homelessness as a result of inflation and the high cost of living, and the fact that many poor families won't necessarily be able to pay rents for their rents and the like? And the second thing is that we do have a significant number of Ukrainian refugees within mid-Sussex, According to national newspapers, a number of the host families are not working out as well as hoped, and there are some obviously being made homeless. Is that being anticipated in the provisions we're providing?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I think you muted yourself a little early, but I'm sure that the gist of the question was taken. Which of the officers would like to take that one? Judy, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, really good question. I think that those of you who've been on the council for some time will know that the numbers in temporary accommodation always hovered for many years, about 2 or 3 years ago, at around 60. And throughout the pandemic, we've seen that number increase and has remained fairly consistently at the sort of 90, 100 level. And some of that is down to the additional responsibilities and duties the government gave us during the pandemic, and they are ongoing, mainly relating to rough sleepers. And also an increase in the other duties relating to extensions of duties to people who were homeless, who we weren't able to move on due to the pandemic. However, you're right, we always see a direct correlation between the numbers in temporary accommodation, the numbers applying for assistance with housing, and the economy. And so you're quite right, we are anticipating an increase in demand, and you'll be aware that we have been buying our own temporary accommodation to try to avoid and reduce the amount of reliance on bed and breakfast or nightly paid, and moving people out of the district. But it is a relentless task, and so yes, on it goes. I think you'll see that next month, the April figures, which we've just been looking at, next time will show a slight improvement, but whether we can sustain that or not is another matter, because as you appreciate, it's a demand-led service. With respect to the Homes for Ukraine scheme, you're quite right, it relies on the goodwill of the host and the guest getting on, and for that arrangement to be sustainable. The government are aware that some of these arrangements have broken down, some of which have broken down quite quickly, and they're looking at trying to do a rematching. So where one breaks down, they might try to rematch them with a different host family, where it might have more chance of succeeding. But ultimately, yes, if that doesn't work, then the council will be responsible for assisting under the homeless persons legislation. And again, it's very difficult to anticipate the impact of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're content, Councillor Jackson?
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the temporary housing, etc., am I right in thinking that we have an officer now who is trying to negotiate accommodation within the private sector? And if that's so, this person's success sort of reflected in these figures, or that's something that we could have data on, in as much to see how cost effective this particular role is and if it's working satisfactorily? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we do have an officer who, amongst other things, does work with the private rented sector to try to negotiate and match, if you like, families to private rented accommodation. The difficulty we've got in this district is the demand for private rented housing is really, really high. And the type of housing stock that we have in the district doesn't lend itself necessarily to private rented, unlike some other places where you've got more urban, dense, flatted communities. So it's extremely difficult for us to access affordable private rented housing. And by affordable, what I mean is that the family who may or may not be on benefits can actually sustain that accommodation. There's no point in us placing them somewhere and encouraging them to move somewhere where we know it won't be sustainable and they won't be able to manage the rent. So it is extremely difficult to find private rented. The competition is just so great.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a comment really in terms of we're talking about particular aspects of homelessness, the number of affordable houses delivered, but there's a glaring omission in terms of the actual number of people on the Common Housing Register in terms of reporting that as an indicator. Perhaps it's a debate for the last bit of the meeting, but I would suggest, I think it's right that in the last 4 years the number of people on the register have doubled, and I would have thought that should be something that we should consider at these meetings as well, in terms of monitoring the overall register, not just the individual elements relating to statutory homelessness. Thank you.
Councillor Hicks, I'm not sure whether that was a statement or whether it was a question to Judy or Sally.
It's really whether we could consider that at the end of the meeting, where we're looking at gaps in existing performance indicators. In terms of, I would argue that it is an important indicator.
I'm happy to respond to at least part of that might not come up under the discussion around performance indicators, if you'd like. I think you're right. The number on the register is an indication of demand, but it isn't as good a measure of the need in some ways, because the access to the council's or any council's housing register is governed by an allocations policy, which is governed by the Housing Act. And so there are some freedoms and flexibilities, but not many. And in fact, if you were to look at the indicator, my advice would be that you would look at those that are in the highest bands, because those are the ones that actually are in the most need and are most likely to either end up in social housing and or homeless. Of course, the allocations policy is overseen by the housing planning and economic growth Scrutiny Committee. So they would go into the detail of that. But of course, that doesn't preclude this committee from having an overarching indicator. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
And I think you're content then, Councillor Hicks.
Well, if we could consider it as one indicator, perhaps at the I think it's worth a discussion about whether we see it as a gap in our targets.
Okay, we'll take that on board, I'm sure. Councillor Bennett.
Just to say, I'd support Councillor Hicks' suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Julie, I expect you'll be comfortable just to note that for later and to see for next time round if that could go in there. Right, I see no more comments on housing, so we're going to go customer services and communications. Does anybody like to speak on this subject, which starts on page 24? Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of quick ones, really. Looking at the number of complaints, which appears to be going down, which is great. One question I have about the complaints, are these complaints that have all been upheld, as opposed to ones that you've had coming in, but actually when you down, you can't actually find anything wrong, or are these real occurrences that do need to be investigated? That was just one point. And the percentage of inquiries resolved at the point of contact. I understand that this is being developed, I also had a query about whether, because so many people are not actually physically working in the office, that they're at home, that it's had an impact on those lines of inquiry being dealt with as rapidly as they might otherwise be. And I think that was all I had to ask on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Which of the officers would like to take that one?
I can take that, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. So with regard to the first question, number of complaints, that refers to the complaints received by the council. So it's not the ones referred to the Ombudsman. Those are reported in a separate report. So these are ones received through our own complaints process. We receive them, investigate them, and we may or may not find fault with the council, if you like, or may not find an opportunity to learn from the complaint. So they don't, this data doesn't say what has been upheld or not. It's simply the number of complaints and what services that they refer to. On the second question, regarding the number of calls, you will be pleased to know that the way in which we've configured our system means that staff can work both remotely and in the office to answer calls. And obviously what we're able to do is we see which staff are available, the hours they work, and they're managed and supported wherever their location. So it hasn't had any impact at all on our capacity to respond to calls. What the system has enabled us to do is to actually have much richer data across the whole council about what calls we're receiving, and also analysis about for what particular topics they're covering, and then that then feeds into the number of calls that we feel we can respond to at the first point of contact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And I think that answers your question, doesn't it, Councillor Stockwell?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Hicks?
Yes, Chairman, it's really to highlight in terms of the customer satisfaction measure is only measuring satisfaction for a minority of phone calls or contacts to the council. I'm not sure from the measures. I don't think emails are measured in any, particularly emails to the contact centre aren't measured in terms of, for example, the percentage of inquiries resolved at point of contact. And I just wonder, in terms of if the phone system has been revised, whether we're able to drill down into those non-contact centre phone lines for planning or housing or whatever, in terms of the quality of the service that we provide there, given that the staffing will be a lot less than for the central contact centre. So that's one question, but I'd just ask for some feedback in terms of progress towards customer satisfaction a lot for the e-forms and general emails that the council receives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Simon, would you like
Certainly.
to respond to that? Thank you.
Certainly I can. So if I cover customer satisfaction in general, what we are also doing is some what are called deep dives. So they're focused work on particular aspects of our services and what customers' feedback is on them. So they're very focused, and the intention there is to improve the process within those services and answer more calls at the first point of contact. So I know I've talked about this before. What we tend to receive by phone are more complex calls. So that principle where people, if you like, customers go, well, actually, while I'm here, can I also? And so there are multiple things that people want to be resolved. And what we're doing through the deep dive work is to see, can we increase that number of multiple things that we can resolve at the first point of contact? With regard to the website, we do have very detailed analytics across the whole website, because it's not just self-service or e-forms that people complete, it's also have they received the information that they want from the website. And that could be information, for example, around bin collections, events, those sorts of things. And we have live data on things like dwell time. So that's the amount of time that someone has looked at a page or a part of a page, and that immediately tells you if they've found the things they need. And we also then track through the path that people take through the website and the searches they do. So we do have that data. And what we then do is look at that, and the website team either improve data or pass information through to the customer services team, where people, for example, won't have seen what they wanted on the website or won't have been able to do what they wanted to do on the website, and then they will contact us by phone. So that then leads to a path of development. Overall, on the customer satisfaction across the whole of the council services, it's a very good point. And at the moment, what we're trying to do is improve our customer service contact and information with the customer contact team, and then extend that across the council for queries at first point of contact, for example. And then on emails, the customer contact team do have response times for emails that they receive, and those are responded to, as you'd expect, quickly, and also recorded on each customer's log, so we know if there's a common query coming up, and then we can look at other ways in which to respond to that. I hope that answers your questions, Councillor Hicks.
Yes, thank you. Just one other point about the issue of the satisfaction relating to those non-central call centre lines, like planning inquiries. Are we able to monitor those currently? And
we can monitor them, but it's not a great satisfaction measure, because if a query is received by phone and then the customer is typically asked, has that answered your query, and the call may continue if it hasn't or not. It's how do we record that? What we do is we can respond. The customer service team do contact people back who've telephoned us in order to get a one-to-one feedback about what the quality of call has been. Realistically, we sample those, so we couldn't call every customer that phoned us. That would be, we'd need a much bigger customer service team to do that. So we have a sample of those. One opportunity that is open to us, but it's not something that we've got in the pipeline to develop, is digital versions of contacting people back in order to get that response and measure it. But that's something we'd have to develop over time, and that also has the dreaded sort of AI facilities that we'd have to enable.
Well, that's fine, thank you. Just what I was particularly concerned about was the length of time to answer the call, whether calls were going away unanswered. Because I think some of these lines may only have staff during part of the day, so it was just considering whether that's looked at.
Certainly, Chairman, I can answer that. The new system enables us to actually switch calls to an available contact centre member of staff, whereas previously it didn't. So people did wait, and that's partly why the measure is not helpful now, because it scans who is on call, who isn't, and then passes it through to them, and then customer service team have scripts, so they're able to see the nature of the call coming in and respond to it. So that's why we're focusing more on, can we resolve more issues at the first point of contact? And then if we can't do that, what are the options around bringing in specialist support into that call? And if you have similar experiences to me, I've been on calls where a specialist is brought into the call I've made in order to answer something more complex. And sometimes I get passed on, and we're just looking at what's the best thing to do there. And to be completely honest, it will change, it will vary according to the service and the systems we have to support people's work.
Great, thank you.
Simon, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Hicks. I see no other hands up for customer service and communications, so I'm going to go on to human resources. Councillor Jackson.
Right, thank you, Chairman. I do notice that the staff sickness level is well below target. I know we've had this pandemic, but presumably those people who have mild symptoms of COVID, because they're working at home, then they don't have to register themselves as off sick. Is that any evidence that this is the case?
Who would like to take that by way of the officers?
I can take that, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon.
Where people are unable to work, they would record themselves as sick. Where they feel able to work, then they don't, but we obviously support people through that. What we're actually seeing now, it's not covered with this, is some increase in the number of people reporting COVID and therefore being off work, and that's simply because people are circulating more under the current government guidance, although we're seeing much shorter periods of absence because of the nature of the variants.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Jackson, I think you'll be content with that answer. Thank you. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Old chestnut of mine that comes up regularly. We report on the ethnic minorities represented in the workforce and the number of employees with disabilities. We're not reporting how many of our employees have served in the armed forces. We've signed the Armed Forces Covenant. We are part of the employee recognition scheme. I have no idea how many of our employees have had the service experience, whether it be 1 day or 5 weeks or 10 years or whatever. We've got nothing to show for it. And while it would be lovely to be able to move us on within the employee recognition scheme, and without some very simple data like this, it's quite difficult. And so I will yet again ask the question: can we do this one way or another? Obviously, if people don't want to tell us, I understand that entirely. But if we don't ask the question, we'll never know. So I'd like that to be looked at, please.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Simon, I think probably that's balls in your court on that one too. Thank you.
Certainly, Chairman, thank you. Yes, we'll take that away and have a look at what we can do to provide that information and collect that information.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Coote.
Well, you could start with the members.
Councillor Coote, I don't quite understand your comment.
Well, we're talking about members who've been in the armed forces who work for the district council. You could start with the members. There are certainly two members on this panel now that have been in the armed forces. If you want a list of people.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. Simon, I think it was, and Councillor Stockwell, is more about staff employing people, wasn't it, rather than who's been in the armed forces?
It's employed. To be fair, thank you, Philip. But it's the employee recognition scheme. So it's those who are employed by the council. But thank you for that. I know a number of you wear medals, and I'm very proud of you for it.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. I do not see anybody else who wishes to raise their hand on human resources. So I'm going to go on to ICT and digital, which by recognition, Simon, is yours, isn't it?
That is right, Chairman. I'm happy to receive any questions.
Oh, Councillor Andrew Lee, I think your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I've got a question on the freedom of information requests. How much do they cost us to execute, to satisfy, and where do they tend to come from? Are they mostly sort of local, or are they coming from all around the place?
Thank you, Chairman. They come from everywhere. So they can come from companies, they can come from individual companies looking at potential markets, what we spend on certain items. They can come from the press, they can come from individual people. So they do come from everywhere, but we do monitor the categories. We also record the cost for each FOI in terms of staff hours or staff time spent to collate the information. And as you'd expect, that varies significantly depending on the complexity and amount of information that we're required to provide.
Thanks, Simon.
May I follow up on that?
Yes, please do.
Would it be possible, not now, because I assume you don't have that information to hand, but would it be possible to know what those costs are, please? Perhaps as a subsequent email or something.
Certainly, Chairman, we can provide that information.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lee. I do not see any more hands up. So I'm going to move on to leisure operations. And Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I understand that under the contract at the moment, we're having to make up the shortfall and also some of the lost profit for the leisure operators. If and when the situation returns to normal in terms of volumes going through the leisure centres, are we at risk through increased energy costs, or is the risk solely for the leisure operators?
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Who might the officers take that question?
I'm happy to take that,
Thank you,
Chairman.
Rob.
Thank you. Yes, so we are on a journey, a recovery journey with Places Leisure in respect of our leisure operations, and from the beginning of the current financial year, we have secured a return to a management fee, not the management fee that we had prior to COVID, but we've secured that, and we've transferred the operational risk back to the contractor. So what that means is that for 2022-23 and beyond, they once again assume all operational risk for the centres, which means that any fluctuations in fuel costs or anything else would rest with them.
Thank you, Rob. I do not see, and Councillor Phillips, your hand's still up, but I think you're content, and thank you. I see no other hands up, so I'm going to move on to revenue and benefits. Has anybody got any comments on that? I see none. And that effectively brings us to the end of Appendix A. I'm just referring back to my agenda. That being so, councillors, the recommendation is that the committee is recommended to Roman 1, note the council's outturn performance for 21-22 and identify any areas where further reporting or information is required. Roman 2, advise the cabinet of any issues that the committee members should be given particular consideration at the cabinet meeting on the 6th of June 2022. And Roman 3, agree the changes to the bundle of indicators to be monitored by the committee in 22-23. And again, use your yes, no buttons, please.
Sorry, Chairman, before we move to a vote.
Sorry, Mike, but we haven't debated the changes on Appendix B.
That was my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to take that next.
Yes, but it's still part.
It's in your recommendation, though.
No, I've got it. I've got it. Okay, well, then to Appendix B. Rob, I think that this was something you were going to take, wasn't it? It's the first item at the top.
Chairman, I'm happy to cover off the fly tipping indicator. Yes, absolutely. So as the narrative says, this is something that's been requested by the committee on a number of occasions. It's a measure that we already use for operational purposes within the team. So the proposal is that we use that measure and report it to committee going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Rob, for adding that in. You know, that it's something we've been talking about for probably at least a year now. Is it possible to add, in addition to that, the number of enforcement actions that are carried out on fly tipping. So no, you'd know far better than me what that exact measure should be, but something like number of fixed penalty notices issued, now that we've got officers qualified to issue them.
Chairman, would you like me to respond?
Yes,
to that?
sorry, Rob. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I mean, as Councillor Bennett says, yes, we're now authorised and trained to issue fixed penalty notices on a reactive basis when sufficient evidence presents itself. I think we can certainly give some thought to what might be a meaningful indicator. I think it might not be FPNs, because it may well be that that some of our early enforcement work would be around warning notices and so on. But we can think about, you know, different enforcement measures and how we can give you some meaningful data around what we're doing now that we've got that power.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Bennett, I think you're content. I see no other hands on Appendix B. So on that basis, I'm going to come back to the recommendations as previously stated, but I think for the sake
Sorry,
of...
Chairman.
Oh, Councillor Hicks.
It was just on the sustainability around electric charging points, and whether is this a moving target in terms of we're just in terms of it's the number, the new target is the number of electric vehicle charging points in council car parks, and are we just moving towards the 26 and then stopping at that point, or what does it mean in terms of operational performance? Is my question.
Emma, is that something you could comment on?
Certainly, Councillor Pulford.
Thank you.
We or will already by the end of next week be beyond the original 26. This first phase will see 54 chargers go in across those first batch of car parks. We'll have 100 in by the end of this calendar year, and then that will grow year on year across the district. So certainly no, it's not the end after the 26. The reason for changing the indicator is so that it's an accurate reflection of the council's performance. Whilst the indicator that we've currently been reporting on in terms of number of chargers per 100,000 population is one that is commonly reported by the government, that doesn't necessarily accurately reflect our performance as a council, because if, say, Network Rail put in 20 chargers, that would show up. No, we didn't do that. That's not ours. So that doesn't reflect our performance. And officers felt that the performance indicators reported here should be reflective of the performance of this council. Obviously, that other information is still available in the wider context, and can be provided to give that context. But since the purpose of the KPIs is to monitor and report on the council's performance, the feeling was that this offered a better way to keep track of that.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Hicks, I think you ought to be content with that. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel like that's the end of the questions on that section, which is why I've put my hand up now. In terms of the point that Councillor Hicks made earlier on about an indicator to do with the housing register, I'm not clear on what this committee's resolved in terms of recommendations and voting on the recommendations going forward. So I was just hoping to get some clarity on that before we vote, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Judy, is that something, was it your area that we were talking about, housing?
Yes, I can respond to that. I think that we said we'd discuss it under Appendix B, didn't we? Because it would be a new indicator for 22-23. And I think that we said that we would consider it and bring it to the committee. But certainly if the committee want to take a vote on that and ask for that indicator to be included, it's certainly something that we can include.
Thank you, Judy. I don't think we need to vote on it. I think it's something you're offering to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. If the committee would think that would be useful and they would like to see that as an indicator, then that's something that officers certainly provide.
Thank you. And Councillor Bennett, I think that you'll be then content with that, wouldn't you? Thank you. Councillor Anne Boutron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was just really to pick up on Councillor Stockwell's earlier point with regard to the number of staff that the council employs that have been in the armed forces. I am particularly disappointed to note that this is still outstanding. It's several years since I've sat on this committee, and obviously I'm substituting today, but I remember that, you know, this is something that's been brought up time and time again. So I would hope that this would be added on as an absolute must this time round, so that we get that oversight we need, given that we have signed the Armed Forces Covenant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell, I know that you want to ask a question, but Neil Barton has kindly put his hand up, and it may be that he's in reply to the statement.
That's fine.
Yes, so we do take an equality report to one of the committees, and we have a monitoring report on for staff monitoring, which breaks down various characteristics of the council staff. And we do have a question now in our application form, which asks people to identify if they've got an armed forces connection. And we have reported that. So we did have, I can't remember what the numbers were offhand, but we did have a number of people who had an armed forces connection who applied for a job with the council last year. And there was more than one person who was appointed. So we did report that in that monitoring report, but as was said previously, we don't actually know how many of our staff have got an armed forces connection, because they don't have to tell us. It's kind of it's different from the one about disability and race, because they're obviously questions that people need to ask anyway. So it's quite difficult for us to provide that information.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. My question really was not relating to the armed forces. I've already covered that. Thank you. My question was really about the amendment that I think it was Councillor Hicks requested and Councillor Bennett spoke about. I just want to be sure somebody could just clarify for me what that's actually going to involve, what we're asking for, please.
Councillor Stockwell, could you be, I'm not sure what your question is pertaining to. What's the subject?
Well, I believe it was Councillor Hicks has requested another KPI to be looked at, and I wasn't quite sure what the nature of that KPI was and how it was going to manifest itself. And I think Councillor Bennett was asking a similar question, I think, or on that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Hicks, could you remind us what the KPI was?
It's the number of people on the housing register, on the common housing register. So it's a figure the council already collects or receives internally, but it would be good, I think, to have oversight from this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. And my understanding is that officers have already taken that on board. I think that is correct, is it? Judy, would you like to confirm that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Right, Councillor. So Appendix B, I do not see any more hands up. So I'm going to assume that you are content with that. So I'm going to have another go at the recommendations. Third time lucky. So the committee is recommended to Roman 1, note the council's outturn performance for 2021-22 and identify any areas where further reporting or information is required. Roman 2, advise the cabinet of any issues that the committee considers should be given on a particular consideration at the cabinet meeting on the 6th of June 2022. And Roman 3, agree the changes to the bundle of indicators to be monitored by the committee in 22-23 2023. And if members would vote with their yes, no buttons, and Alison will be kind enough to announce the result. Thank you.
That's 11 votes for, Chairman.
Thank you. So that is carried. That brings us on to item 8, Committee for Leader Finance Performance Work Programme 22-23, which is going to be introduced by Tom Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The report sets out your basic work for the year. There may, of course, be further items, but you'll note that there's items for every meeting that's scheduled in the calendar.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Lee, you've got a question?
Yes, sort of, Chairman. So this is our work programme, obviously. I recollect from the last council when we were debating the wheres and whens of meetings, that I think it was left undefined as to what time the meetings in person would be. So can I just confirm, or my understanding is that we'll be meeting at 7 p.m. again, is that correct? Or is that something this committee needs to decide? Thank you.
Well, what we're doing at the moment is we're consulting with the chairman, and the chairman of the two other scrutiny committees are meeting at 7 in the council chamber. Councillor Knight, as you know, is away at the moment. We didn't get an opportunity to speak to him, but from past conversations, I suspect his decision will be the same, but we will wait to speak to him before confirming that.
In that case, I mean, I really would like the meeting to be at 7. Can the committee, this committee here and now, decide that the meetings will be at 7, please? Can I put that forward even as a proposal?
Tom, I'm going to defer to you because I'm not sure that, given your comments about the chairman of the meetings, that we have that power, do we?
Well, normally it is the chairman that decides the timing of the meeting and the location. So I would ask that we have Councillor Knight consulted on that. But as I said, Councillor Knight has previously indicated that 7 o'clock in the chamber would be his preferred method of dealing with this scrutiny committee. So I would ask that we could leave it to speak to the chairman when he gets back.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Lee, are you content to do that?
No, not really. I'd like us just to decide that it's at 7 o'clock, please. And with the committee, the whole committee is here with substitutes. I think it'd be a good idea just to get it nailed. If Councillor Knight has already said that he thinks 7 o'clock is in line, it's we know what he thinks, and we're proposing something that's in line with what he thinks anyway.
Let's just put that on hold then, Councillor Lee. Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to unmute myself. I was looking at the work programme, and the overall scope of this committee is leader, finance and performance. And it's quite clear in the programme as set out in the report, where that you've got the performance outturn reports coming to this committee regularly, and the corporate plan and budget process that comes forward. Helpfully, the leader emailed all councillors the newly rearranged cabinet portfolios this morning. And what my question is about where the scrutiny is of some of the leaders' portfolio. I think specifically Gatwick Airport, Burgess Hill Town Centre, Clare Hall and the Orchard Shopping Centre, looking at, the leader's got 9 areas of responsibility, and those 4, I'm not sure where they sit in and which scrutiny committee they go in. And I suppose my other question is, should they be coming to this scrutiny committee? And if they shouldn't items be scheduled where they are brought here for full scrutiny? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Which officer would like to?
I'll attempt to reply,
Thank you.
Chairman. As Councillor Bennett has said, we got this morning and we haven't had a chance to work through it. But you may well be right that Clare Hall, for instance, has been dealt with by the community committee in the past, and we'll need to discuss that and see where appropriate it should go. It may be necessary in the light of this to look at the responsibilities of the 3 scrutiny committees so it is clearer.
Thank you. Councillor de Bell.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I've had a few problems. Contrary to Councillor Lee's statement, I would say that as a courtesy, it would be best left. And I see no harm in leaving the decision on the meeting timing, bearing in mind that the chairman has already stated that he favours 7 o'clock rather than 6. As a courtesy, I believe that we should leave it until Councillor Knight is back in position. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would move that, by the way.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Coote.
I would totally agree with Councillor de Bell, and I would second it. I think it would be a gross discourtesy for us to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. Councillor Sweatman.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me for getting totally confused over this, but we're talking about the meetings being at 7 o'clock, scrutiny meeting at 7 o'clock. But today, Member Services sent out a whole raft of emails changing the dates to be at 7 o'clock in the council chamber.
Yeah, that was for the other scrutiny meetings, which the chairman have agreed should be at 7 o'clock. But they didn't relate to this meeting because we haven't had a chance to speak to Councillor. Yet.
Sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, I understand what you're saying, but I would very much like to defer to the chairman because I believe it both polite and courteous to ask him if he would change the meeting. I think we have every indication that that's what he's going to do. It would fall in line with all the other meetings, so why wouldn't it be? But I would feel uncomfortable about taking the decision there when we do have the ability to talk to the chairman next Tuesday or Wednesday. And I'm sure that he will be very pleased to confirm that it will be 7 o'clock. And I'm hoping perhaps you might consider that the appropriate way forward.
No, I don't consider that the appropriate way forward. I don't see that it's a discourtesy at all. I think we've got lots of members in this committee who aren't necessarily part of the same group, and they need to be consulted as well. I also understand that Councillor Knight would be very happy for it to be back at 7 o'clock. So I don't agree with the discourtesy argument. I don't think it's a discourtesy. In other words, not that I'm saying I'm happy to be discourteous to the chairman. I'm saying I don't think it would be discourteous to the chairman. But anyway, you know, you're the chair of this meeting. If you don't want us to take that forward, I'm not going to die in a ditch about it.
And I'd appreciate that, Councillor Lee, because I would be uncomfortable, and there's 1 or 2 other councillors who wouldn't be comfortable either. But perhaps, Tom, you could put matters to rest early next week when Councillor Knight is back.
Yes, that is our intention, Chairman.
Thank you. So that brings me to the recommendations. Then the committee is recommended to agree the indicative work programme set out in paragraph 5 of this report. Again, on yes, no buttons, and Alison's going to be kind enough to announce the result.
Are you voting, Chairman?
Oh, yes, I am. Thank you very much.
That's 12 votes for, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Lee, thank you for your support. It's very good of you. Appreciate it. That brings us on to item 9, questions pursuant to Council Rule 10.2, due to notice of which has been given. I have none, and therefore I bring this meeting to a close at 19:29. And I would ask you to remain in front of your cameras with the microphones off until confirmation has been given that the live stream has finished. And on that basis, I welcome you a very good evening. Councillors, and thank you for your attention and participation. Thank you.